Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. We've got another head-to-head battle, a cage match for week 15 between myself and Andrew Makisupa Wiggins. If you've played daily fantasy for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you definitely have seen this guy's name at the top of the tournaments, at the top of head-to-heads, at the top of 50-50s and double-ups, pretty much across NFL and definitely in the NBA streets as well, where he spends most of his time. And is just an absolute machine. So I'm really happy to have him here. He's a good friend of mine that I've met throughout the years here in daily fantasy, and I'm glad that he could take the time to come out here on the show. For those of you who play head-to-heads on Draftkings, you know that when you play a head-to-head, you get to pick your lineup against the salary. I get to pick my lineup against the salary, against the salary cap, and there's going to be some overlap, right? We're going to probably have some of the same studs. We're probably going to have some of the same values, as those guys are chalkier players. So what we do here on this cage match and this head-to-head, how it's different, we draft the players on Draftkings using the salaries. So if I pick somebody, he can't choose him. He has chosen, as all my guests get to pick, whether they want 1st and 1 or 2nd and 2. He has chosen 2nd and 2, and then we're going to go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 the rest of the way. We each just pick one player after we get the 1st and 1 and 2nd and 2 out of the way. And my guest always gets to choose how much and what we are playing for. So I, as always, will be playing for No Kid Hungry, trying to provide school meals and food, breakfast, lunches for kids who are without. 1 in 6 kids in America deals with hunger issues, and we're trying to do everything that we can to try and fix that. And Wiggins is going to be playing for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. $500 is what we're playing for today. The loser will donate that amount of money to the winner's charity. So without any further ado, let me bring in Wiggins here. Andrew, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great. And it's only Wednesday. I don't normally look at the slate this early, so this should be interesting.
It makes it tougher, right?
But you know what I did? I sat in for Evan for the Establish a Run podcast yesterday. So I did actually a bunch of prep, and we went through game by game and just reviewed everything that went down. So I'm about as prepared as I'll ever be on a Wednesday.
Sounds pretty good. Why don't you take a little bit of time? You mentioned Evan Silva. You mentioned Establish the Run. We've had Adam Levitan on one of these cage matches before. He edged me out. I'm still a little bit bitter about that. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on social media and where they can find your work throughout the week on Establish the Run?
Yeah, so, if you're not following Evan Silva or Adam Levitan, those are the guys you want to be following. And then we have a site called Establish a Run where 2 of those gentlemen, myself, Taylor KB, some other guys that are really good at football, put out all of our information, and we're basically just trying to get everything that I use to prepare in a week. We're trying to get that all and Establish a Run. So that's what I'm using for the vast majority of my preparation, is just reading all the articles and the content that we put out in the podcast. And I think it puts you in a really good spot to be successful week to week on DraftKings and FanDuel and Yahoo. So yeah.
And you're on the Friday night show there, right? You're now a part of that one, which I think was a great addition.
Yeah, so I probably like week 7 or 8, I joined the Friday show where we just talk about basically every player on the slate. And so that's been fun.
All right, well, let's see. I have to pick who I want because you gave me the number 1 pick. Now, typically, there's some value plays that I tend to lean towards in these. There's players that I tend to go for. I think there's a lot more value on this slate. At least, it's early, right? It's Wednesday. This is one of the things that makes these games a little bit tougher. But because we have to pick them on Wednesday, and it's a game of partial information, just like poker, and we don't have all the information. We're kind of under the gun, or under the gun +1 here, so we don't have all that much information to choose from. But I do think that we've got enough to be able to pick some good teams. And as I said, there's more value out there than one would expect. There's some that you might be there's some value I think that could open up later in the week, but we don't have all that information yet. I tend to go with a value play first when I have the first pick, and I'm going to go with Raheem Mostert from San Francisco 49ers. He has been their best running back this year, and they've had great running back play. I think Coleman has been fine, but not great metrically, right? And then you have Breida, who's been very good, but not able to stay healthy. And now you have Raheem Mostert, who's had like 4.8 yards before the first touch this last couple of weeks, which is as much a credit to the offensive line as anything else. But they're facing off against Atlanta this week, who also is allowing one of the worst rates in terms of the average yards before first touch in the league. So San Francisco's offensive line has a great chance this week to absolutely maul the defensive line of the Atlanta Falcons. And Mostert, if he gets 15 plus touches at 5.2K as a home favored running back, I like that value at 5.2K. So I'm going to plug him in first, and we'll see where we go from there. On to you for your 2 picks.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a risky pick, I think. I mean,
yeah, could be.
He's looked like the guy there, but who knows? If he comes out and he's not running great, maybe Coleman or Breida gets heavily involved again. So I'd be a little bit afraid of him, but if he is the guy, then yeah, it's a great spot. I mean, looks like they have the highest team total on the entire slate. So should be some opportunity. And they're 11-point favorites if he plays from ahead.
Like I think 15 touches is well in play. He had 13 last week in a game that was very pass heavy.
Well, he certainly looks like he's got the most juice of those 3 running backs at this point in time. So I would not be surprised if he has a big game. I'm going to go with 2 running backs that are in the same game. And it's funny, with what the joke that Patrick Laird has been throughout the fantasy community. I mean, now he's finally in a spot where I think he's going to be extremely chalky this week. He's only 4.5K. Gets New York. It is on the road, but pretty good matchup. And, he's got actually one of the biggest workloads of any running back out there right now, if you follow up what he did last week. So I think he's a really safe pick at 4.5K. And then the other side, here's a guy who I think is also going to be extremely chalky this week. And he has not had the production to back it up coming into this, but it's that Miami matchup, and it's Barkley. Will he come through and finally give us a decent game? I don't know. And I'll probably shy away from him more in tournaments just because he hasn't shown us anything in quite a while here. But in cash, I think he's a pretty safe play. He's going to catch a few balls. He figures he's as likely to score a touchdown as ever this week. Actually, Danny Dimes was practicing again today, so it might not even be the Eli Manning show. We'll have to see on that one. But even if it is Eli, I think that's fine. I mean, he's been known to check down a lot to Barkley over the years. So, I think he's got a floor of 3 or 4 catches, and then you just kind of hope he scores a touchdown.
I think that Barkley is a great play. Laird was somebody that was in consideration for me at 1, so I don't mind that pick either. I think you really just have to rely on his passing game ability because he's gotten 25 carries the last 2 weeks, and he's averaging 2.6 yards per carry. So he's not going to give you much on the ground, but his involvement through the air is where it's really at. Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, the matchups he had the previous 2 weeks, Philly and the New York Jets, are pretty good against running backs. So this is a better setup, and maybe he can get something going on the ground. But even if he doesn't, he's had 4 catches each of the last 2 weeks.
He's got a good floor. For sure.
Yep.
Yeah, no qualms with either of those. I'm going to come back here, staying at running back, and I'm going to take Chris Carson going up against Carolina, who's given up so many rushing yards and so many touchdowns. And because of the turnovers, they're giving short fields to opposing teams. And now with Rashard Penny out this week, now you've got Chris Carson in a situation where now he's not being challenged by that other big back that's next to him, where he ceded a touchdown carry to Penny just because he wanted to see his teammate score a touchdown because he's been playing really well. I'm expecting 20 to 25 touches out of Chris Carson this week. The 3 to 4 catches, 3 to 4 targets that he's been seeing every single week has been very good for his floor, and the amount of workload that he gets from this gum-chewing coaching staff that just wants to, pardon the pun, Wiggins, but establish the run. I'm going to take it against a team that can't stop it, so I'm going to take Chris Carson at 7,500, who I think is right there on par with a Saquon Barkley coming into this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Right now, the projections have Barkley about 3 points ahead of Carson, but I mean, geez. If I had to pick one of them, there was a lot on the line. Like,
it's tough.
I kind of feel like I'd say Carson. I'm gonna have to give that one some more thought and dig into the numbers a little bit more there. But yeah, I mean, just with how bad Barkley's been, I don't think Barkley is 100%. I mean, he just hasn't really done much since he came back from his ankle injury, and he's a guy that relies on big plays. And if he's not getting those, then he's kind of an average running back outside of the big home run plays that we've been known to get from him. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. Carson's going to be very, very heavily owned.
I mean, at least the way it is this year with Barkley, because last year Barkley was getting between 7 and 11 targets basically every single week. And we just haven't seen that sort of usage from him outside of 1 week this year where he hasn't been that dominant pass catching back. And yes, he was on the right side of variance last year with as many long touchdowns as he scored, and that was always going to regress because that's not a skill that you can replicate year over year or game over game. But the lack of consistent usage in the passing game is what's been the most shocking for me with Saquon Barkley. Maybe it's because they added other short route guys in Golden Tate, and they've had Shepard, they lost Ingram. With as many injuries as they've had on the outside, I would have expected Saquon Barkley to be able to replicate the amount of targets that he got last year, but he just hasn't.
Yeah, and Carolina's been getting absolutely gashed on the ground, so I mean that's another point in Chris Carson's favor.
Of course.
I mean, it just sure seems like a game where Carson's going to get the ball 30 times. So it'll be interesting to see how the ownership shakes out there between those two players. And, you know, in years past, I would have thought Barkley would probably not be that owned, but we've seen a lot this year where guys, you know, the public just doesn't really care that much about recent production. It's more about matchups, I would say. So Barkley's, you know, going to be one of the highest owned guys, even though he's been terrible, and his price is, you know, fair. I wouldn't say he's underpriced really at 7.7K.
Miami's been the cure to all that ails you this year. It's like just plug guys in against Miami. Their touchdown equity goes way up against Miami, and their usage just basically stays the same. Just Miami's just really bad.
Unless your name's Jamison Crowder, but yeah, for the most part.
Sigh.
All right, next pick. I'm going to go with. You've got a couple receivers in play with DJ Shark likely to miss this week and might even be done for the season. Actually, they're calling him week to week. You got Conley, Dede, and Keelan Cole, I think are all top values. But to me, the best of the bunch, I think, is Chris Conley at 3.6K. Dede, you know, his role's not really going to change. He might get some extra targets, but he's an extra $1,000, and he's been okay, but he really hasn't done a whole lot this year. Not that Conley has either, but Conley also in the buy low model, which is something we put up over at Established Runs, basically looking at opportunity for players and guys that have underproduced based on their opportunity. So Chris Conley is a guy who's been getting opportunities, been getting air yards. So you expect that maybe to hit. And hopefully this is the week that happens for Conley. So I'm plugging him in at 3.6K here.
Don't mind that at all. The injury to Chark does open up a lot of vacated targets for other players in this Jacksonville offense. Conley has been kind of a mainstay in that offense the last few weeks as well. So I do like that pick for value at wide receiver. There's value in Jacksonville's wideouts. I also think that there's value on another team's wideouts. Depending on what you think about him as an athlete, I don't care, because opportunity trumps talent, at least as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that Greg Ward is going to be on the field a ton for the Philadelphia Eagles, who just have nobody to throw to on the outside with all the injuries that they've sustained to their wide receiving core this year, and even just last week during the game, Greg Ward at 3K provides me with an awful lot of salary flexibility, as well as somebody who's going to be on the field a lot. Got 9 targets last week, including some red zone and end zone looks as well. Now, could he bring all of them in? No, but now he's got a full week working with the ones. They can't just throw the ball to the tight ends every single time. I'm expecting somewhere between 5 and 8 targets for a 3K wide receiver. To me, that seems nuts. So give me Greg Ward on the Eagles going up against Washington, who hasn't been able to stop any wide receivers this year. So Greg Ward with a good matchup and a lot of snaps played.
I like that mostly because I looked him up on my spreadsheet and he was broken. I didn't have him as on a team. So that's helpful for me. Now I can...
Thank you. I'm glad I could help you out.
Well, these are the things that happen on a Wednesday morning.
It's true.
You haven't had a chance to look through everything yet. Especially this time of year too. You know, it's like I try not to dig too deep into it until like Thursday or really Friday, because the injuries make such a difference. But I think we've actually got a pretty good idea on some of these injuries already, just because some of these guys,
everything happened last week. Yeah. There's a lot of value on this slate. There's a lot of good plays at prices. Like you said, Barkley, who you picked, Carson, who I picked, I think are just too cheap based on matchup, salary, opportunity, everything else. And then there's good value plays, like you mentioned, with the Jacksonville wide receivers, the Philadelphia Eagles injuries at wide receiver. There's a lot out there this week that we can go attack.
Yes, sir.
So who are you going with your 4th pick?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I think I'm just going to go with the big dog, Christian McCaffrey. Let's just do it.
Oh, I was hoping he'd fall to me here. I should have gone him over Ward.
You should have, especially after I had just taken a value receiver,
Mm-hmm.
Could have projected us going for the big guy.
I mean, I think we were both angling to get him. I thought Ward would have been on your radar.
Yeah, he would have been if my spreadsheet wasn't broken.
He would have been. So you locked down Christian McCaffrey. Do you want to talk about Christian McCaffrey, or we just want to move on? Because he's Christian McCaffrey and he's freaking good.
Yeah, it's like last week he had a pretty crappy game and he still scored 25 Draftkings points, and he got tackled on the one twice, which was frustrating for me as a guy that was big on Christian McCaffrey last week. A lot of people didn't play him on FanDuel, and I did instead of playing DeAndre Hopkins, so that didn't work out very well. What is
your call on where this team is going to go the next 3 weeks with Christian McCaffrey? Are they going to angle towards him trying to force feed him the ball, like they don't already force feed him the ball, but trying to force feed him the ball so that he can get that 1,000 season, that double 1K season, or no?
Well, I mean, it sure looks like it. Last week they were down like 40-15 or something crazy, and he was in there whole fourth quarter. He racked up 6 catches in the fourth quarter or something like that, and that's when he almost scored one of those touchdowns. He got tackled on the one, and then Kyle Allen vultured it from him. So, if he was in that game, yeah, the final score of that game was 20-40, and they scored a touchdown late. So, they were down huge. Yeah, so it sure looks like they're trying to get him that. I don't know how close he is to it. He didn't have a good game on the ground. He hasn't had a good game on the ground really in a while here. He hasn't hit 100 yards since week 10, actually.
He's got 1,220 rushing, and he's got about 726 receiving. So he'd need just under 300 yards receiving over the next 3 weeks to get there. So, he can get there. He would need about 90 yards a week.
Yeah, and he's in play for the most yards ever, right? I don't know what he would need. Chris Johnson has that. It was like 2,500 yards.
I guess.
And I know that they were talking. So yeah, I guess with the math, if he could get that, if he can get to 1,000 yards receiving,
plus 50 yards rushing every week.
Yeah, it can be done. It's gonna be tough, but
yeah,
I think they'll at least try for another week here.
I don't see why they wouldn't. But that locks up your flex. You've got 2 wide receivers, a tight end, quarterback, and a defense left to go. Coming back over to my team. I've got Mostert, I've got Carson, I've got Ward. That's gonna I'm gonna push over to wide receiver here. And I'm gonna want to get the guy that's got the highest projection for me, highest raw projection, highest medium projection of any of the wide receivers out there. And part of it is due to his normal volume, and part of it is due to injuries that have happened around him. He's facing off against some really short wide receivers, cornerbacks this week, where a tall wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins can have a big advantage with all the volume that he's got. And this is a game that I think could actually shoot out with Houston and Tennessee because of how good this Tennessee offense has been under Ryan Tannehill. With him under center, they've been like the best offense in the league. Apparently he's just every great quarterback rolled into one now after being horrible in Miami. Maybe Miami should have kept him and not needed to go look for a new quarterback. They already had a good quarterback. They let him walk. He became a backup and just took over and became one of the best offenses in football. But that to me means that the Texans are going to have to keep their foot on the throttle, whether they're winning this game or whether they're playing catch up. That's going to be great for DeAndre Hopkins prospects here. For me at 8K, I definitely want to lock in that floor from him. So whether they're winning or losing, I think that this game is going to be very explosive and a lot of fun. I can see DeAndre Hopkins wandering into the end zone yet again.
Yep. I like it. I'd say there's a decent chance Will Fuller doesn't play again this week. So Hopkins had something like 13 targets last week. I mean, some of it, well, it was kind of a lot of it was in garbage time, but that's fine. And he's, in my mind, maybe the best receiver in the league. So
there's so many good receivers in the league. Like I try not
Hopkins
to say that so much
good.
Because he's really good. But like, so are so many of these other guys. I think wide receiver is deeper than ever. And I know that this is like a DFS show and it's specifically for week 15, but like I was thinking about like rankings for 2020, like for like 10 minutes the other day. because of like guys, the rookies, the younger guys like AJ Brown, guys like DJ Chark, guys like all these other players that have had these big bust out seasons, right? Debo Samuel is the rookie. All these other guys, they're not going to be higher than like the wide receiver 20 or 25 next season. It's going to be absurd trying to rank wide receivers as deep with greatness as that position is right now in the league. It's a renaissance period for wide receivers.
Indeed.
All right.
So
you're up.
Speaking of great wide receivers, I will take Larry Fitzgerald. No, I'm just kidding. He actually is looking like a pretty good value this week.
Every week.
Yeah, he hasn't been a good value recently. He's down to 4.3K.
No, but like every week he's in every model. Every week, every projection system shows him as like, well, you know, Larry Fitzgerald could have a lot of catches.
Historically, yes, but the models finally gave up on him this year. I haven't seen him floating around lately, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, he was early in the year on FanDuel. Yep. He was like 75% owned and everything. He was doing absolutely nothing. I'm going to go. I think this game has a good chance of shooting out. And Dallas has kind of quietly been one of, if not the fastest paced teams in the league. I know early it was Arizona, but Dallas is right up there. And I could just see this turn into a shootout between them and the LA Rams this week. So I'm going to go with Dak. I like Dak a lot. And they've been struggling. It's a home game. You'd think maybe they get things on track here. I know that the Rams defense has been playing very well, but I think that's okay. I'm thinking this game's more likely just to be a back and forth than a defensive battle. So Dak Prescott for me at quarterback.
All right. Fair enough. Dak Prescott plugs in at quarterback, 6,300. I do think that game could shoot out with two of the top three pace teams, I believe, right now, or at least I forget what the exact status, whether it was the last 6 weeks or whether it's overall, but two of the faster pace teams in the league, no doubt, going up against one another in Dallas. Good weather game, obviously, because of the stadium there. So not having to worry about rain and wind and snow and anything else. Coming back to me, I'm going to save my quarterback because I don't have to go there. I am going to take a wide receiver, and it's going to be Jarvis Landry for 6,700 going against Arizona. Arizona has been bad against every single position this year. They've allowed the most red zone trips for opposing teams or opposing offenses on a game-by-game basis, with over 4 red zone trips per game. And Jarvis Landry is one of the league leaders in that category with an absurd 30% of the Cleveland Browns red zone targets. So if they're going to get into the red zone and their game plan pushes them to throw the ball to Jarvis Landry 30% of their dropbacks, I want to have as much touchdown equity as I can get. Jarvis Landry gives me that for only 6,700. I still think that he's too cheap based on the volume that he gets on a week-to-week basis, based on the red zone upside and touchdown equity that he brings into a game against a team that's going to let them get to the red zone, theoretically, and going to allow completed passes in the red zone. So I'm going to want the guy that gets the most passes for Cleveland. So give me Jarvis Landry at 6,700. People don't want to play him because that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And the impression that everybody has from Jarvis Landry is he's that short throw, 6-yard A-dot guy that he was when he was on the Miami Dolphins. But since he's been with the Cleveland Browns, his A-dot for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, is sitting at around 13 or 14. So he's 10 and a half with an average yards per catch of 14 plus. So he is a completely different wide receiver, or he's being utilized in a completely different manner, being thrown to down the field, where he never was that guy in Miami. So I'm going to take Jarvis Landry. I'm going to let the pricing model sleep on him and keep playing him pretty much every single week.
Yep, makes sense. I think people are starting to come around to the fact that he's actually the number one receiver there. I mean, everyone's definitely given up on Odell. And I mean,
especially with the injury report on Odell. That sealed it.
Yeah, I mean, just something's off there. So that helps explain it, because he's just been such a different player this year than he has been throughout his whole career. So I don't think that, he's still a young guy. So it's got to be the injury, I think, more than anything.
Agree.
I'm going to go with, I think the guy who benefits the most just from all the injuries in Philly has got to be Zach Ertz. And he had a ton of targets last week, scored 2 touchdowns, one of which was in overtime, but still counts. But he's got a super soft matchup against Philly this week. The targets will be there.
Against Washington.
And he's got a good chance of getting in the end zone. So, boom, Zach Ertz.
I mean, I can't not like that pick, right? Like, you want to play players against, you want to play players that are getting a ton of volume, and you want to play players against Washington. Zach Ertz, a solid pick there. You've got 3,900 remaining, but you do have a defense. It's going to boost that a little bit, and 2 wide receivers to choose from. As we mentioned, there are a bunch of value wide receivers that are available on this slate. For me, though, I don't need Jarvis anymore. For me, though, I'm going to go with a tight end. And I could pay up for tight end with somebody like Austin Hooper back, but it's a horrific matchup, even as good as New Orleans did against this team last week, and with Cook catching 2 touchdowns before he got hurt. The flow chart with David Njoku, I've already got a Cleveland wide receiver. I want the one that is going to get more red zone usage, so that's where I went with that. Noah Fant's come around a lot recently. Gesicki's been targeted a ton. Gerald Everett, though, has been injured, and while he's been injured, Tyler Higbee has basically been the absolute beast with 25 targets over the last 3 weeks, 200-yard games the last 2 weeks, against 2 really good matchups for tight ends. As you mentioned, we both are very high on this Dallas Rams game. I think that this can be a very high-scoring game, go over the total, possibly turn into a shootout. Both teams bring to the table things that the other defense can't really stop, so this does look like a game that could shoot out. And with the amount of usage that Higbee has gotten between the 20s and inside the red zone, and especially with end zone targets the last 3 weeks, where he's racked up a few of those as well, I really like Tyler Higbee at 3,900. I think he's still underpriced for what his current role is on this Rams squad. So give me Higbee. I've got 5,200 remaining, and that includes a defense and a flex.
Yeah, well, I think you should have waited on tight end since I already took one. You knew I wasn't going to take Higbee. So
I checked it back to you.
I appreciate it. I'm going to go with the Lions. I think the Lions are going to be the heaviest owned defense on DraftKings this week. They're 2,300. They're at home, and they're against Tampa Bay. So, Jameis every week is throwing like 2 to 3 interceptions. So it's just free points for your defense. Maybe they take, it's crazy, maybe they take one to the house, maybe not. But for 2,300, I think there's a pretty high floor, which is something you wouldn't normally say about a defense, especially a cheap one. But that's just what Jameis Winston does. So happy to slot them in, save a little bit of money. And now I can spend a little bit more on my receivers here because we're getting down to the bottom of the barrel.
You can stack Jameis with one of his pass catchers and the defense that's opposing him, and probably be profitable in tournaments over the course of the season.
Yeah.
How insane is that? Right? That's
hilarious. Well, when he throws a pick 6, he just gets the ball right back. I mean,
that's the other thing.
Possible.
Yeah. Like, that's the best case scenario for a quarterback. People don't understand that, is that in daily fantasy, if you have a quarterback and he throws an interception, that's bad. If he throws an interception and turns into a touchdown the other way, that's good. You'd rather it turn into a pick 6 than have the other team run time off the clock. Now, the pick 6 causes them to be behind, better game script for them to throw, and they get the ball right back and get to keep piling up points. So 4,800 remaining for you for your 2 wide receivers. I think you're sitting in a good enough spot there. You're not going to have to worry about that. And you're probably not competing against me for tight ends anymore. So that means that we've got a couple of spots to go from. Now, I have to decide whether or not I can make a high dollar play at flex, right? Because Nick Chubb, not really keen on him this week. Ezekiel Elliott, 7,800, does look like he is very possibly too cheap in this spot. But I might have to go a little bit off the board. And I did this last week, and it worked out even though I didn't win the cage match. But Derrick Henry's been on a per game basis, basically as good as Christian McCaffrey for the last 5 games, the last month and a half or so, with their bye week being in week 11. Touchdown machine, absolutely being fed the ball, does not have the floor that the pass catching running backs seem to have, but he's coming in at about 1,500 cheaper than is Christian McCaffrey. That would leave me with 7,200. I don't know that I can get there because of Hopkins. I don't think that I can get there where I would have both sides of that game. So I'm gonna have to find myself a little bit better of a value in there, somebody that's a little bit cheaper that I can go with. And you mentioned how Tampa Bay gives up a ton of turnovers, right? Jameis Winston, whether he's fumbling or whether he's throwing interceptions, is giving the ball back to the other team. So for me, Kenny Galladay at 7,200 gives me big playability against a defense that we've been streaming wide receivers against pretty much all season long, and comes in 1,300 cheaper than does Derrick Henry, to give me the flexibility that I need to get the quarterback that I think is going to be the good play this week. So at 7,200, give me Kenny Galladay. With the injury to Marvin Jones Jr., there just aren't that many people to throw to now. Galladay should be pretty steady in his target allocation this week. He's been the favorite target of David Blau the last 2 weeks since he took since he took over at quarterback, with the majority of the red zone and end zone targets headed towards Kenny Galladay. And now with Marvin Jones Jr. out, I can't see that diminishing, if not picking up a couple extra targets going his way as well. So give me Kenny Galladay in the flex, 4,200 remaining, 8,500 total for me at a quarterback and a defense.
All right. Well, when you can play the third wide receiver on a team that's been on a historically bad run over the last 4 months,
you got to do it.
You got to do it. Keelan Cole is $3K. He should be the guy really that his role changes the most, because he's going to just slot in, I think, for DJ Shark. And he's a relatively talented guy. He's a very fast player, so he could break a big play. A lot of people were big on him. I remember that they were comparing his speed to Tyreek Hill in the season-long stuff. It must have been before last season, which was a bit of a whiff, as we have learned. But I think for minimum, on DraftKings with the PPR, it's like you get 3-4 catches for 40 yards, you're doing okay, and anything above that is gravy. So it's never too risky to play the stone min guy. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to give me some funds to spend up for my last wide receiver.
All right, Keelan Cole at 3K. The battle of the 3K wide receivers, your Keelan Cole going up against my Greg Ward. We're going to see who wins that individual matchup. The 3K wide receivers, like we said, there's a lot of perceivable value on this slate. For me, I can't afford the high dollar quarterbacks. I can't afford Deshaun Watson to pair with DeAndre Hopkins. I could theoretically afford Baker Mayfield and just completely punt my defense going up against Arizona. I need a little bit of extra savings, and that brings me down to this range with Garoppolo and Goff. Garoppolo, though, is the one that I'm going to go with, even though I've got Mostert in this lineup. As you mentioned, they have the highest team total, or one of the highest team totals implied on this slate. And there is something working in Jimmy Garoppolo's favor. He is a much better quarterback when he's not pressured. Imagine that. That when you don't apply pressure to him, he is probably going to be able to throw and complete a pass to a wide receiver from a clean pocket. Well, he gets a matchup against Atlanta, who is pressuring opposing quarterbacks at about a 20% rate this year, by far the lowest in the league. Garoppolo throws for about a 45% longer average yards per completion, or average yards per attempt, when he throws from a clean pocket, when he's not pressured. And he has an over 115 rating when throwing from that non-pressured clean pocket situation. So great efficiency spot here for Garoppolo. I think that this offense is going to score a lot of points this week. And I think they're going to do it in a lot of different ways. And I don't have to pick which one of his pass catchers is going to get it, whether it's going to be Kittle or Kendrick Bourne catching 2, or anybody else that you want to pick from this pass catching group that he has. But Garoppolo is going to be the one that's going to benefit. I don't think that you need to stack a quarterback in a cash game scenario like this one. So give me Garoppolo against Atlanta's woeful pass rush. At 61, giving me 2,400 for a defense remaining.
Yep, I like it. I think he's going to be a really popular play this week for good reason. So there's a number of ways. There's actually a bunch of interesting receivers left here. I have 6.6K. I could go DJ Moore, Emmanuel Sanders. Probably not Cooper Kupp, because he's not seen the field as much as we would expect, which is an interesting and bizarre situation. I could stack Amari Cooper with Dak, which I would like to do, except I think Jalen Ramsey's probably going to shadow him, so that's not ideal. I think the best play in this range is actually going to leave $400, but that's fine. I don't mind doing that. That's probably about the upper end of the amount of money I'd want to leave. And that's Robert Woods. So he's also in that Dallas Rams game, obviously, which we've talked about. We think it could be a high-scoring affair. And Robert Woods is just kind of taking control of this team. I mean, his game log is nuts. He's had at least 95 yards in the last 4 games, 7, 6, 13, 7 targets, found the end zone last week. So he's just been very, very consistent. And I expect him to do the same in this matchup.
Yeah, he's been great recently. Got in the end zone a couple of times now. Finally, just the yards and receptions have been tremendous for him. And the last couple of weeks, as you said, I don't know what the deal is with Cooper Kupp right now. Like, why is he not producing as much as
playing.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Why is he not on the field? Right? Like, is there an injury that they're not being forthcoming with, kind of like Gurley last year, involving Cooper Kupp, or is he just wearing down in the first season back from an ACL tear?
I don't know. I mean, he's had decent production. He scored a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, on 10 targets.
Yeah, it's weird. And he's run more dropbacks. So I think he was on the field for like 30% of the snaps, but he ran like 60% of the dropbacks. So it's not quite as dire as it may appear if you just look at the snap count. But yeah, it's just an odd situation. I'm not really sure what is going on there. And Brandon Cooks, same thing. So, when Josh Reynolds is playing over those guys, something isn't right.
I have no way to disagree with you. So Dak Prescott, Patrick Laird, Saquon Barkley, Conley Cole, Woods, Ertz, McCaffrey, and the Lions defense. That is an extremely strong team. I have to come up with a defense that's 2,400 and less, and I cannot choose the Lions. For me, it's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. At least this defensive line can get pressure, although they have not done it recently with only 3 sacks over the past 3 games. They do return home this week, and if somebody is going to throw some interceptions with the defenses versus the offenses that are at this price point, I believe that it could be Kirk Cousins in this spot. They have difference makers at all 3 levels and very good pass rushers in Ingram and Bosa to provide some pressure towards Kirk Cousins and possibly turn an interception into, or a fumble into a touchdown coming back the other way. So for 2,400, I'm going to take the Chargers defense. Give me Garoppolo, Mostert, Carson, Ward, Hopkins, Landry, Higbee, Galladay, and Chargers. Wiggins, I think that you're the favorite in this one, but I'm going to see if my team can get there and overcome this week. Thank you for joining us again, man. And guys, if you haven't already, definitely give him a follow. Andrew Wiggins on Twitter. It's not the basketball player. It's him. And go check out his stuff on Establish the Run as well if you haven't already. Andrew, best of luck to you, man.
Before I go, you're going to have to unblock me. I can't enter the game because you have
You got to be kidding me. Oh, my God. All right, I'll figure it out. Give me a second. I'll unblock you, and then we'll do it. Guys, thank you for joining.
I'm going to take all your heads up right as soon as you unblock me. Man.
Damn it. Guys, thanks for joining. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Ring that notifications bell. And until that next video, we'll catch you later. Bye.
He's a legend.